Hi, everybody. Mitch Tanenbaum here. Thanks for joining me today. This is the security news update for February 20th, 2022. As a reminder, you can find the security news update podcast at cybersecurity.us, along with other videos that we've done, like this is last week's security hanging by a pin. You can also see the newsletters here at the blog site in the folder SNU for Security News Update. So with that, let's get started talking about this week's news. So the first thing is kind of interesting, I think. I've always talked about the negative security ramifications of QR codes because you're clicking on something or taking a picture of something, you have actually no clue what it is, whether it's malicious or it's not malicious. And this week, past week, Coinbase did an ad, and the ad was basically just a QR code that was bouncing around the screen like a Pong character, and hoping that you'd click on it. So, I think as a corporate organization, we're not going to get around QR codes. They're not going to go away. And that means you just need to harden the endpoint using things like DNS filtering and zero trust in order to counter the potential negative effects of these QR codes. So with that, I would say, by virtue of the fact that somebody paid, I don't know how much, $1 million or more for a Super Bowl ad using QR codes, they have just become mainstream, and you better plan for dealing with malicious ones because you know that malicious actors are going to go off and pick that up. In the not very secure apps category, Chinese apps are notorious for stealing information. India keeps banning apps. They just banned another couple of dozen of them, as I recall. What the Chinese have been doing is rebranding the apps that get banned, and the Indians go off and say, that's nice that you rebranded it, but we actually know it's the same app, so we're going to ban that one too. So they've banned over 300 apps now, which is still, a drop in a bucket. But if they ban, a dozen apps a week, maybe at some point in time we'll actually get ahead of the power curve. Meantime, in the United States, we have all these, same apps, and we let them happen because our laws are different here. It's harder to go off and ban things like that. And for the Indians, they just say, we're going to ban it because we want to. So here's one that sort of, makes you squint your eyes a bit, and it's a challenge. Apparently, and this is also in India, but there's no reason to believe that it couldn't happen here. Some folks who didn't like activists of one form or another, human rights activists, decided to go off and plant malicious evidence on their phones. And that's just like, any other kind of malware you put on a phone, right? If you can go off and figure out a way to put a piece of, virus software on someone's phone, there's no reason why you can't figure out a way to go off and plant fake evidence. In this particular case, the cybersecurity firm SentinelOne found this and found the hacks. They're calling the group Modified Elephant, I guess, in tribute to that. This is an Indian group, and they said that this particular group has been around since 2012. But how would a victim, if you were a victim, how would you prove in court that the data that was found on your phone wasn't yours? That's really a challenge, and so it behooves people to go off and step up the security on their phones, especially if they're any kind of high-profile individual. Next item in the reference category, CISA has released a list of free cybersecurity tools and services. It's a good list. The challenge is that a lot of it is stuff you already knew about. Some of it is only available to government entities or to nonprofits or to critical infrastructure. But I'm hoping that they're going to go maintain this and enhance it and continue to add things to it, at which point it will become more valuable. So we shall see whether they do that. Hopefully they do. In the software category, Google is trying to keep up with Microsoft. Microsoft, you may remember, released something called Super Duper Secure Mode in Edge, kind of an interesting name. Google's name is not quite as entertaining as that, but it's a Chrome's enhanced safe browsing mode. And normally I would not advocate for something like this because it does send more data to Google. But the benefit of that is they have a better ability to go off and check in real time as to whether the link that your user is clicking on is malicious. So I would probably advocate, the trade-off between privacy and security in this case. I would advocate probably for turning on safe mode. It's pretty easy to do. I'm sure you can push it with a GPO if you're in the Windows world, and or Intune if you are inclined to do it that way. And it's just another layer of security. So I would recommend that. Still staying on Google in the patch category, Google released a patch for an active 0-day for Google 98 or Google 97. I guess it releases to Google 98, and it affects Windows, Mac, and Linux, all platforms. And it's one that is being actively exploited in the wild. Because of the number of copies of Google that are out there, it will take a month to go do that. So you might want to force the issue by going to help about and push to download. And then Google will restart Chrome automatically when you do that and reopen the windows that were open. So, if you feel at risk, I would push that. Otherwise, you'll get it fairly soon all by yourself, whether you do anything or not. And Adobe, in the wonderful world of Adobe, who knows how to buy software, thank you, Flash, that is full of bugs, acquired the Magento product line and their commerce product line, which are their e-commerce products. And they are currently being targeted actively with a bug that rates 9.8 out of 10, which is, fairly high, I would say, on the scale of nastiness. And so right now, up until now, until they released it, it was considered a targeted attack. But now that it has been released, assume that it's no longer targeted because kind of the cat's out of the bag, and the bad guy is just going to go off and use that. So if you haven't already gone off, if you're a Adobe Commerce user, then I would definitely make sure you patch that sooner rather than later. In a legislative and legal category, the SEC fined BlockFile, which is a kind of a cryptocurrency savings and loan service, $100 million, which is pretty sizable fine, for operating as an unregistered investment company and misleading the public about the risk that their investments represent. They claim to manage $100 billion in investment. So $100 million fine to them is probably okay. They can probably afford it. Bigger issue is they are requiring changes to BlockFi's business model, at least as it pertains to U.S. citizens. And so, I don't know whether that's going to have any financial impact on them in terms of, not being able to trick people into thinking that this is a safe government insured bank or not. And maybe people knew exactly what they were getting into, but the SEC wasn't terribly happy. Probably everybody's aware of the Canadian truckers convoy, which includes a lot of people who are not truckers, but started out with some truckers. And there is a site called Give, Send, Go. It's a Christian fundraising site that is kind of like GoFundMe that has been funding. People have been able to donate using that site to donate money to the truckers who are on strike in Canada and the other people. This happened because GoFundMe dropped them because the Canadian government said, well, this is basically a terrorist organization, and if you go off and aid a terrorist organization, then we might choose to prosecute you. So GoFundMe decided to drop these guys. Give, Send, Go did not. So apparently the hacker community decided that they would take matters into their own hands, and they hacked the Give, Send, Go website and have leaked 30 megabytes of donor data from the site. And oh yeah, by the way, they gave the donor data to the police. So what the police will do with that, I am not sure, but I am sure that the police are interested in who is funding this. I talk a lot about insider threat. And this is kind of the ultimate insider threat. I guess a couple of years ago, a Navy nuclear submarine engineer was arrested for trying to sell nuclear secrets to some unnamed foreign country, likely, I'm guessing, Russia or China, more than likely, because I don't think North Korea has nuclear subs, but maybe they do. And they even went to the extent of putting data on SD cards and putting the SD cards inside of peanut butter sandwiches in a dead drop. These two, the engineer and his wife, were arrested. Both of them just pleaded guilty on different days, but in the last week or so. His wife, who is being charged with aiding and abetting because she acted as a lookout for him when he was dropping his peanut butter sandwiches in the park, got a 3-year sentence, and he faces a negotiated 12 to 17 years for putting the SD cards in the peanut butter sandwich. So we shall see where that goes. But that's the ultimate insider threat. I mean, it's a real big challenge. What do you do with that? How do you solve that? And this guy has a top secret clearance. You kind of assume he's trustworthy, but apparently that was not the case. So in the hack arena, Capture RX is a company that helps hospitals figure out how to get low-cost prescriptions to indigent patients or people who are on government subsidies. There's a government program that allows the government to do that, and they coordinate between the government, I guess, and the hospital. They lost millions and millions of patient records. They're being sued up and down, and they have proposed, their lawyers, a $4.75 million settlement, most of which I'm sure will go to the lawyers, but nonetheless, a $4.75 million settlement for these class action lawsuits. And the company says that likely, if this settlement is not approved, that they'll file for bankruptcy, which of course, from the victim standpoint, really doesn't help them at all. So we shall see what happens there. But that's the words of the wise. That's kind of the worst case scenario. What can happen when you get on the wrong end of a data breach, and it can get very expensive, and you could wind up in a situation where you file for bankruptcy to protect the company. The SEC is continuing the pressure on publicly traded companies where they have the most ability to pressure, and they have released new cybersecurity rules, and a group of senators on top of that have told the SECs that they need to make companies disclose what cybersecurity expertise they have on the board, which for most boards I would say is almost zero. And if the senators say, if the SEC doesn't do that as a regulation, they'll figure out a way to go stick that in one of the bills that they pass in Congress. So I anticipate that the SEC is going to release that rule because they probably don't want to they don't know what Congress might do if Congress has the option to go make a stronger bill. For defense contractors, this is not a necessarily good week. The challenge has been what the government is doing with CMMC, their cybersecurity maturity model certification program. They keep changing it. Now they changed it again. In late November, they said we're going to go cut down the number of levels, and we're going to say that the people at the bottom end of the food chain do not need to pay $10, $20, $30, $50,000 to get a certification from a third party. And now they came back and said, we were just kidding. Actually, almost everybody still does need to get a certification from a third party. And by the way, it's going to be about 2 years before we figure out what the rules are. So for folks that are in the defense space, it's just more uncertainty. We have recommendations on what you do in the meantime, but it's just more uncertainty. And in the multi-factor security arena, what we're seeing is for companies that use push notifications, they are the hackers are using trying an effort to try to fatigue users into clicking on stuff, and we've seen some cases where that's actually happened. that the hackers just send 10,000 kind of figuratively, not actually, a whole bunch of MFA notifications by attempting to log on to a website, hoping that the employee will just click on the link to say, just go away, just quit bugging me, and we'll get into the website. And we've seen that with email or Office 365, where people have been on the wrong end of that deal, where an employee has gone off and clicked on it. Yeah, let them in, when it really wasn't them. That's really a training issue, and it's a hard training issue. But that is an active attack, so you got to deal with it. And last but not least is the security news bites for this week. You may remember a couple of months ago when a St. Louis reporter ratted out the state's education department website that said it had in the HTML of the website, it had all of the social security numbers of everybody that matched a query that a parent could do to check on seeing whether a teacher had credentials or not. And the governor said, "Oh, they're hacking the website, and we're going to go off and get the state police to go investigate this." Well, apparently the state prosecutor, has realized that that's not something that they're going to win at, and it's going to turn them into a laughing stock in court because this is not hacking. And they decided that they're not going to prosecute the newspaper. So that's good, but it just points to that politicians sometimes use the Justice Department in their government entity to go after people they don't like for whatever reason. There is now a new tool. You've probably seen pixelated images where they rearrange the pixels on an image to mask them. It turns out apparently that there's now a free tool available on GitHub that will allow you to depixelate that image. So if you thought that face that you were looking at, or that license plate you're looking at, was masked, that's not really going to be masked anymore. What you really need to do is put a black bar over it, and then that really hides it and you can't see it. So kind of cool new tool. If certainly not illegal to use that. So if you're in the geek frame of mind, you might want to download the tool from GitHub and play with it and see whether you can depixelate anything. On the this wouldn't be so sad if but it's incredibly funny. Some father decided that he couldn't get his teenage kids to stop using the internet off their phones instead of going to sleep at night. So what he did was buy a cell phone jammer, which of course cell phone jammers in the United States are illegal. Excuse me, unless you're a law enforcement entity. But he bought one anyway. It was highly effective. It stopped his kids from surfing the internet. But what he didn't understand, what was eventually discovered, was it also basically totally shut down the cellular network in the neighboring town. So nobody in the neighboring town could use their internet. He turned on this jammer between midnight and 3 a.m. and everybody's cell service went away during that time period. The feds, they reported this, the phone company reported this to the feds. The feds brought their signal sweeper out. They figured out where this guy was living because he wasn't trying to hide it. I'm sure he didn't understand that what he was doing was a felony with a potential fine of $30,000 and jail time. And they kind of knocked on his door and explained to him that you probably shouldn't do that. I don't know whether they'll prosecute him or not. They'll probably put him on probation, would be my guess. But it was apparently a very effective technique at stopping his kids from using the internet at night instead of going to bed. So I don't recommend you do that. That is definitely not legal in the United States. And last but not least, Russia continues to make some token efforts at whacking at some of the cyber attackers. They arrested another group of cyber attackers, but they're doing this like, 1Z, 2Z, 3, 4 people, 6 people. I guess they're doing it for PR purposes. I don't know that anybody's particularly fooled by these antics because it's certainly not making much of a difference in terms of the overall level of hacking coming out of Russia. But I think he's thinking he's going to get some PR value out of it. So he'll continue to do that. And I guess we should take whatever we can get. My guess is if you get on Putin's wrong side and you get arrested, you probably shouldn't expect a comfy jail cell in a nice, cushy, middle-class neighborhood. You're probably going to go to a place where you'd prefer that you didn't go. So with that, thanks for joining me today. Come back next week. If we can help you with anything, please let us know. Take care.
Turnkey Cybersecurity and Privacy Solutions offers the complete cybersecurity program for small to medium-sized businesses. They include everything needed to secure your business and meet compliance requirements. Visit our website at turnkeycybersecurityandprivacysolutions.com to learn more.